Hello friends and welcome back to my session. This is Dr. Priya Singh, Assistant Professor, Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. We have been discussing a lot about tourism and sustainability. Today we will be talking about a very interesting yet very concerning topic, which is global warming and sustainable tourism. In our session today, we will be discussing the overview of global warming, what are the causes of global warming, consequences of global warming, impacts, and also we would be highlighting about the interconnection between global warming and sustainable tourism. We will discuss about certain important international agreements on climate change, and then we will conclude. So let's begin. Before the discussion, we should know what is global warming. Since childhood we have been learning about global warming. So again, I would like to introduce you what is global warming. It refers to the long-term increase in Earth's average surface temperature. And why does it happen? Because the Earth's atmosphere acts like a blanket which allows the sunlight to enter its surface, and it gets trapped some of the heat that radiates back from the Earth's surface. So this is known as greenhouse effect. And human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil and natural gases, also activities like deforestation and industrial processes have significantly increased the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, leading to the global warming. So in fact, we need to prevent the greenhouse gases, and in return we will be having lesser amount of global warming. There are now certain causes which actually cause global warming. So the first and foremost cause is burning of fossil fuels. The fossil fuels like coal, oil and natural gas, upon combustion, they releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which ultimately results in greenhouse gas and results in global warming. The second reason is deforestation. The large scale clearing of forest for agriculture, logging and urbanization reduces the Earth's capacity to absorb CO2 through photosynthesis. If there are no trees, no plants, there would be less requirement of CO2, and therefore it would be abundantly available in the increased amount in the atmosphere. So even deforestation plays a very major role in increasing, or basically amount of greenhouse gases would be more. Third is industrial processes. Certain industrial activity, majorly the industries like cement industries and chemical manufacturing, release greenhouse gases which include CO2 and also methane, that is CH4, and nitrous oxide NO2. There are certain other reasons due to which we have global warming, that is agricultural activities. Livestock farming, particularly cattle rearing, produces significant amount of methane through enteric fermentation and manure management. So even methane plays a very important role and is a very major gas of greenhouse gases. So we need to avoid producing lot of methane into atmosphere in order to have less of global warming. Also the land use changes like converting natural lands such as forest and grasslands into agriculture or urban area releases stored carbon and reduces Earth's ability to absorb carbon dioxide, that is CO2. Now we will talk about the consequences. We are trying our best to reduce the global warming. But what happens if it does happen and we have no control? So we need to face some major consequences, like the first is rising temperature. The temperature of the atmosphere through heat waves and altered weather patterns is on rise, and we need to control it in order to have less effect on the environment. The second consequence can be melting ice caps and rising of sea levels, which will automatically result into flooding. So we need to even try to have low temperature so that there is no or less melting of ice and the level of the sea remain at its position at its own pace. There are certain extreme weather events also, that is intensified hurricanes, floods or droughts. So there can be any type of a calamity without any notice or at a very short notice just because of the global warming or the rising temperature. Even the ecosystem disruptions may happen, which may lead to habitat loss or biodiversity shift. So many terrestrial, marine ecosystems can be lost because of the global warming consequences. There can be incidences of water scarcity and drought like agriculture, drinking water impacts and others. Also, there can be certain food security challenges like crop yield reductions, fisheries impact, etc. There can be also few health hazards or health risks which can lead to spreading of the diseases like heat related illness, anything that is happening because of the heat, that can be heat stroke or anything like rise in temperature causes dizziness, fainting, vomiting. All these diseases can arise because of the higher temperature. Also, there can be certain socio-economic impacts like infrastructural damage or economic cost can be reduced. Okay, we will now discuss some of the contributors to climate change. Because all this is happening, there are certain also factors or the contributors which are causing climate change. Number one is burning of fossil fuels. So, burning of fossil fuel through power generation using coal, oil and natural gas used for electricity. Production emit lot of amount of carbon dioxide, which ultimately results into climate change and global warming. Transportation through fossil fuel combustion in cars, trucks, ships and planes is a significant source of CO2 emissions. Also, the deforestation and land use change like clearing of forest for a large scale deforestation for agriculture, logging and urbanization reduces the carbon sinks and release stored CO2, and there would be no trees, so there would be no absorption of CO2 and lot of carbon dioxide will be present in the atmosphere, which will again result in increasing the temperature and finally global warming will happen. Conversion of land into forests, into agricultural or urban areas reduces the earth's ability to absorb CO2. Also, there are certain industrial processes as we discussed like cement manufacturing process, production releases lot of gases like methane, carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, which are all hazardous and are also known as very common greenhouse gases. Also, the agriculture and livestock, the ruminant animals like cow produce methane during their digestion, and improper handling of animal waste releases methane and nitrous oxide. Also, the waste management processes like organic waste in landfills and certain waste treatments produce methane and CO2 emissions. So, by now we have understood that more of methane and more of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere will lead to lot of rise in temperature. The heat won't be absorbed and there would be lot of heat on the surface of the earth, finally resulting into global warming. So, now what are the impacts of global warming? We will be discussing two impacts under different heads like environmental impacts and also societal impacts. So, in terms of environmental impacts, environment impacts will comprise of rising temperatures. There would be sudden rise and shock in the temperatures. Also, due to the rise in temperature, there would be melting of ice and glaciers, which will automatically lead into flooding. There can be sudden changes in the weather patterns, as even today we are so uncertain whether for how long will the summer months continue, how long will be the winter, when will be the monsoon starting. This all disturbance are because we have a very change and nowadays very dynamic weather patterns because of global warming. Also, we will have a disrupted ecosystem. So, our ecosystem, our habitats will be disrupted. The marine or the terrestrial will be disrupted because of change in the weather patterns and also climate change. There would be ocean acidification, which will destroy and deteriorate our marine life and marine ecosystem. When we talk about societal impacts, we talk about there can be chances of water scarcity, which is a very major chance, and there would be everywhere there would be scarcity of water, which will lead to drought. There can be food insecurities. If there is no water, definitely there can also be arising incidences of food insecurities. There can be human health risk. There is no proper food, no proper water, there are high in temperatures, therefore definitely the health of the human would be affected. So we will have severe cases and incidences of health risk for a human. There can be certain economic consequences, which includes the finances, basically the loss of finances, and also there can be social displacement, that people will move from one place to other because they would have no food, no shelter. So there would be lot of displacement and lot of disturbance worldwide and globally. Okay, in our last session also we have talked about 17 goals of SDGs. So there are certain goals which are directly related to climate change. So we will be discussing that. The SDG 7, that is affordable and clean energy, 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, the climate action, that is SDG 13, SDG 14, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land. These all will be disturbed or affected in some or the other ways through the global warming or climate change. Definitely we will have the cities and the communities affected. We will have some change when seen in the climate because of the global warming. We will also have the marine ecosystem being disturbed and the terrestrial ecosystem, that is life on land, being very chaotic when there is lot of global warming or any sort of sudden climate change. So now what we will try to draw some interconnection between global warming and sustainable tourism, because these two are very interrelated. So we will try to understand it through three mechanisms. First is impact of tourism on climate change, the other would be impact of climate change on tourism, and then we will have certain sustainable tourism as a climate change mitigation strategy. Okay, so we will discuss impact of tourism on climate change now. So how does the tourism affects climate change? Through travel related emissions, like tourism activity includes transportation like flights, cars, cruise and accommodation, which release lot of greenhouse gases through the burning of fossil fuel. So it will directly affect in the increase of greenhouse gases and also global warming. Second is deforestation and land degradation, because the unsustainable tourism practices can lead to deforestation for certain infrastructural development and land degradation through overuse of natural resources. Now we will see what is the impact of climate change on tourism. There can be certain impact like changing destinations and attractions, the rising temperature, the sea level rise and extreme weather events can affect the attractiveness and accessibility of tourist destination, impacting tourism revenue. Exactly, when there is lot of snowfall in Manali or any such area which is known for the snowfall, the roads get blocked and not many people or the tourists are able to reach the destination. So ultimately there would be loss of revenue. So the sudden climate change or the reverse changes in the nature basically can cause very drastic change in the economy of the tourism industry. Also the disrupted seasons and weather patterns. The climate change can disrupt traditional tourism seasons and alter the weather patterns, affecting the activities like skiing, beach tourism, wildlife viewing, etc. Also if we visit any such adventure tourism site like Goa for example in monsoons, then we will have no tourists can avail those facilities and we will have lot of disturbance because of the climate for our activities. So these things are very important. The climate plays a very important role in conducting or in practicing of any tourist activity. Now we will talk how sustainable tourism is a means of a climate change mitigation strategy. So we should have low carbon tourism. What does it mean? It means that we should promote energy efficient transportation, renewable energy use in hotels, and waste reduction measures can help to reduce the carbon footprints of the tourism industry. So we should try to have lot of eco-friendly practices in the hotel, should have lot of renewable resources or natural resources used in the hotel, and also a very well planned waste management should be done in the hotels. Conservation and protection. Sustainable tourism practices emphasize on the conservation of natural resources, protection of ecosystems and minimizing the negative environment impacts of tourism activities. So we should always try to conserve and protect nature in order to fight or in order to overcome any type of natural or environmental loss. Also, the community engagement and benefits. Sustainable tourism seeks to engage local communities, empower them economically, and promote their participation in decision-making processes. Now, we will try to understand what are the benefits of sustainable tourism in addressing climate change. So, there are two basically things that we need to discuss, that is mitigating emissions and resilience and adaptation. So, what is mitigating emissions? The sustainable tourism practice can contribute to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promoting a low carbon economy. So, the main cause is greenhouse gases. If we are able to have lot of strong control over the emissions of greenhouse gas, we can definitely have the control on the amount of carbon being released in the atmosphere, and finally can try to reduce the global warming of the earth. Also, the resilience and adaptation means that sustainable tourism supports the resilience and adaptation of destinations to climate change, impacts through ecosystem restoration, disaster preparation, and also sustainable resource management. If we are ready for any type of climate change, we are already prepared, or we have a very strong ecosystem restoration process, then we will definitely be able to adapt to any such consequences. Okay, now two very important international agreements have also been discussed on climate change, and the worldwide they are very prominent and they are very popular because they have come up with lot of very essential and beneficial key features. So, the two agreements that I want to discuss here is the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol. The Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol are the two significant international agreements which aims at addressing the climate change and reducing the greenhouse gases emissions. Both Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement are significant milestones in global climate governance. Significantly, they are also important to address any type of climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Paris Agreement is built upon Kyoto Protocol and represents a more inclusive and comprehensive approach with broader participation from countries worldwide. So, the Paris Agreement is more popular and is more taken into account as compared to Kyoto Protocol, but that does not mean that Kyoto Protocol is less important or has low features. So, first we will discuss about Paris Agreement. It was adopted in 2015. The Paris Agreement is an international treaty under UNFCCC, which is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Also, it aims to strengthen the global response to climate change and keep global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. What are the key features of Paris Agreement? The key features of Paris Agreements are nationally determined contribution, which are called as NDCs, and which says that each participating country sets its own voluntary targets and actions to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. That means every country has their own targets and they have their own measurements that how we need to reduce the greenhouse gases. Also, it offers transparency framework. The agreement establishes a robust system for monitoring, reporting and verifying countries' progress towards their targets. The Global Stocktake talks about that Paris Agreement includes a regular review process to assess collective progress towards the agreement's goal and enhance ambition over time. What about the climate finance? Developed countries commit to providing financial support to developing countries for climate change adaptation and also mitigating efforts. Now we will come to Kyoto Protocol. So, what is Kyoto Protocol? Adopted in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty under the UNFCCC, which is again United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, its primary objective was to reduce greenhouse gas emission to combat global warming. That's what I told you, like if we are able to control the greenhouse gas, the emissions are regulated and the amount of carbon and methane or other greenhouse gases are able to be put down and cut short basically, so we are able to combat any form of global warming. The key feature of this Kyoto Protocol are as follows, which says the first is binding targets. The industrialized countries committed to specific emission reduction targets towards the period 2008 to 2012. They are all about Kyoto Protocol, and there are certain emission tradings. The Kyoto Protocol introduced emission trading mechanism to allow countries to trade emissions, credits and achieve their targets more cost effectively. Now we have Clean Development Mechanism under Kyoto Protocol, which is CDM. The CDM enabled developed countries to invest in emission reduction projects. How we can reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases in developing countries as a means of offset to their own emissions. So this was about Kyoto Protocol. Now what are the call to action that can be taken place to address such consequences? First is mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, like implement low carbon practices in tourism, promote renewable energy use and reduce transportation related emission. Try to use more of public transport, try to use green transports in return. And we should also embrace sustainable practices, adopt sustainable tourism practices, conserve natural resources, promote biodiversity and minimize negative environmental impacts. Engage local communities. We should involve local communities in decision making processes, empower them economically and support their cultural heritage and tradition. Also, we should enhance resilience by building resilience in tourist destination through integrating climate change adaptation measures, disaster preparing and sustainable resource management. Also by educating and raising awareness, increase awareness among tourists, industries, stakeholders and the general public about the impacts of global warming and the importance of sustainable tourism. So I would now like to summarize the session. The global warming poses a very significant threat to our planet and ecosystem and impact tourism and the well-being of communities worldwide. The sustainable tourism offers a pathways to mitigate climate change, impact, protect natural sources and promote local development, which will help in reducing the emissions and also reducing the global warming. By adopting sustainable practices, engaging in international agreements, following the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris agreements and taking individual also yet collective actions, we can create a more resilient and sustainable future for tourism, and not only tourism, also for our planet Earth. So by this I conclude my session. I hope you enjoyed and had some learning outcomes. Thank you so much and have a very good day.